What happens when a prince who claims to advocate mental health awareness completely loses his composure on one of America's most beloved late-night shows? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most explosive celebrity meltdown that left an entire television studio in stunned silence. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the moment when royal entitlement collided head first with American comedy, and the results were absolutely catastrophic. The confrontation that followed was so intense that producers had to make a decision that shocked the entertainment world. But before we get into all the jaw-dropping details, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story has more twists than you could ever imagine. It was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. Prince Harry had a new mental health initiative to discuss, and Jimmy Kimmel Live was the perfect platform to reach millions of Americans. The show's producers had briefed both parties extensively. The questions had been pre-approved, and everything seemed set for a smooth interview. But what they didn't anticipate was just how volatile the prince's mood would be that particular evening. Jimmy Kimmel walked onto his stage with his usual confident stride, flashing that trademark grin that had endeared him to audiences for years. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. Phones were already recording, and the energy in the studio was electric. This was exactly the kind of high-profile guest appearance that could generate millions of views and countless social media clips. Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy announced with his characteristic enthusiasm, "Please welcome His Royal Highness, Prince Harry." The audience erupted in applause as Prince Harry emerged from backstage, but something was immediately off. His smile seemed forced, his wave was mechanical, and there was a tension in his shoulders that the cameras picked up instantly. As he took his seat across from Jimmy, the first cracks in his composure were already beginning to show. "Harry, great to have you here," Jimmy began, settling into his chair with the easy confidence of someone who had conducted thousands of interviews. "How are you feeling about being back in Los Angeles?" "Well, Jimmy," Prince Harry replied, his voice carrying an edge that caught the host off guard. "I have to say, the way your producers handled the pre-interview process was rather unprofessional. I'm not used to being kept waiting for 45 minutes in a cramped dressing room." The audience fell silent. This wasn't the warm, familiar banter they expected. Jimmy's eyebrows raised slightly, but his professional instincts kicked in immediately. "Oh, I apologize for that," Jimmy said smoothly, trying to redirect the conversation. "Sometimes things run a bit behind schedule. But hey, you're here now, and that's what matters. I understand you're working on some exciting mental health projects." "That's correct," Prince Harry responded curtly, his posture rigid and unwelcoming. "Though I have to wonder if your audience is sophisticated enough to understand the complexities of what we're trying to accomplish." A collective gasp rippled through the studio audience. Jimmy's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered, but the damage was already done. The prince had just insulted not only the host, but every single person watching. "Well," Jimmy said, his voice taking on a slightly harder edge, "I think our audience is pretty smart. They've been supporting this show for over 20 years. 20 years of what exactly?" Prince Harry shot back, leaning forward aggressively. "Juvenile humor and celebrity gossip? That's hardly the platform for serious discourse about mental health reform." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Audience members were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, and the production crew was exchanging worried glances. Jimmy Kimmel, however, wasn't about to let his show or his audience be disparaged. Without pushing back, "You know what, Harry," Jimmy said, his famous comedic timing now weaponized. "For someone who talks a lot about mental health awareness, you seem pretty unaware of how you're coming across right now." Prince Harry's face flushed red. "Excuse me? Are you questioning my mental state on national television?" "I'm questioning your manners," Jimmy replied without missing a beat. "You came on my show, insulted my staff, insulted my audience, and now you're acting like the victim. That's not very princely behavior." The prince stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I will not sit here and be lectured by a late-night comedian about appropriate behavior." "Then maybe you should have stayed home," Jimmy fired back, also rising from his seat. "Because this is exactly the kind of entitled attitude that people are tired of." The studio audience was now completely silent, watching this unprecedented confrontation unfold. Prince Harry's hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and his voice rose to a volume that had everyone in the studio on edge. Entitled? Entitled, he shouted. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? What I've given up? I've dedicated my life to service, to helping people, and you want to sit there and mock me? Nobody's mocking your service, Jimmy replied, his voice steady but firm. But right now, you're acting like a spoiled brat who can't handle being treated like everyone else. That was the breaking point. Prince Harry's face contorted with rage, and he took a step toward Jimmy's desk, pointing an accusatory finger at the host. How dare you speak to me that way? He snarled. Do you know who I am? Do you understand the position you're putting yourself in? Jimmy didn't back down an inch. Yeah, I know exactly who you are. You're a guest on my show who's having a meltdown because someone finally called you out on your behavior. The confrontation was escalating beyond anything anyone in that studio had ever witnessed, and what happened next would change everything. The security guards stationed around the studio perimeter had already started moving closer to the stage, but Jimmy Kimmel held up a subtle hand gesture to keep them at bay. He wasn't about to let anyone say he couldn't handle his own show, even when facing down an increasingly unhinged member of the British royal family. You want to know what's really putting me in a position? Jimmy said, his voice cutting through the thick tension like a blade. Having to explain to my viewers why a grown man is throwing a tantrum on live television. Prince Harry's breathing was becoming visibly labored, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to maintain even a semblance of composure. This isn't a tantrum, this is righteous anger. You Americans have no concept of respect or decorum. Oh, we have plenty of respect, Jimmy shot back, his comedic instincts now fully engaged in combat mode. We just don't hand it out automatically because someone was born into the right family. The audience, initially shocked into silence, was now starting to murmur among themselves. Some were pulling out their phones to record, while others were looking toward the exits. This was either the most entertaining or most uncomfortable thing they had ever witnessed in person. Born into the right family. Prince Harry's voice cracked with indignation. You think this is about privilege? I walked away from everything. I gave up my titles, my country, my family relationships. And for what? To be disrespected by someone who makes a living telling jokes. Jimmy leaned back against his desk, crossing his arms with an expression that was equal parts amused and incredulous. Yeah, you gave up your titles to come to America and lecture us about mental health while having a complete breakdown on television. That's really showing us how it's done. I am not having a breakdown, Prince Harry insisted, though his voice was shaking and his hands were trembling visibly. I am trying to have a serious conversation about important issues, and you're turning it into a circus. Buddy, Jimmy said, gesturing around the studio. You turned it into a circus the moment you walked out here with that attitude. I've interviewed presidents, movie stars, musicians, and even other royalty. None of them acted like this. Prince Harry's eyes narrowed dangerously. Other royalty? You mean the sanitized, media-trained puppets who say exactly what their handlers tell them to say? I'm trying to be authentic here. Authentic. Jimmy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling this? Because what I'm seeing is someone who can't handle basic human interaction without losing his mind. The prince took another step closer to Jimmy's desk, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that the studio microphones still picked up clearly. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Kimmel. The kind of power and influence that I still carry, even after everything. Jimmy's expression hardened. Are you threatening me right now? On my own show? I'm simply pointing out that actions have consequences, Prince Harry replied, his voice taking on a cold, calculated tone that was somehow more unsettling than his earlier shouting. You think you can humiliate me in front of millions of people and there won't be repercussions? The studio audience was now genuinely frightened. Several people had started moving toward the exits, and the security guards were receiving urgent hand signals from the production team. This had gone far beyond an uncomfortable interview and was entering dangerous territory. Jimmy, however, refused to be intimidated. You know what? I've had it with your threats and your attitude. This is my show, these are my people, and I'm not going to let you come in here and terrorize everyone because you can't handle a conversation. Terrorize. Prince Harry's laugh was bitter and harsh. You want to see what real terror looks like? You want to understand what it means to face actual consequences for your actions? What I want Jimmy said, his voice rising to match the prince's intensity, is for you to leave my studio before this gets any worse. Prince Harry's face went white with rage. You're kicking me off your show? I'm asking you to leave before I have to make that decision for you. Jimmy replied firmly. You came here to promote mental health awareness, but all you've done is demonstrate exactly why people need help dealing with entitled, unstable individuals. Unstable. The word seemed to hit Prince Harry like a physical blow. You're calling me unstable? After everything I've been through, everything I've survived, you have the audacity to question my mental state. I'm not questioning your mental state, Jimmy said, his voice now deadly serious. I'm questioning your character. And right now, what I'm seeing is someone who thinks being born into royalty gives them the right to treat people like garbage. Prince Harry's hands were shaking so violently now that he had to grip the edge of Jimmy's desk to steady himself. You don't know anything about my character. You don't know what I've sacrificed, what I've endured, what I've had to overcome. Then why don't you tell us? Jimmy challenged. Instead of throwing insults and making threats, why don't you actually have the conversation you claim you came here to have? For a moment, it seemed like Prince Harry might actually respond to the challenge. His breathing slowed slightly, and some of the tension left his shoulders. But then his eyes hardened again, and his voice took on that same menacing tone. Because you don't deserve to hear it, he said quietly. You and your audience don't deserve to understand the depth of what real service means, what real sacrifice looks like. Jimmy shook his head in disgust. And there it is. The real problem. You think you're better than everyone else, and you can't handle being treated like a regular person. I'm not a regular person, Prince Harry snapped. I never have been, and I never will be. And the sooner you and everyone else accepts that, the better off we'll all be. The studio had fallen into an eerie silence. Even the crew members had stopped moving, frozen in place as they watched this unprecedented meltdown unfold. Jimmy Kimmel stood behind his desk, staring at Prince Harry with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. You know what? Jimmy said finally. You're absolutely right. You're not a regular person. Regular people have basic human decency. That final insult hit Prince Harry like a sledgehammer. His face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a deep crimson that made the studio lights reflect off his forehead. The silence in the room was so complete that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning system. Basic human decency. Prince Harry repeated slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with venom. You want to lecture me about decency? You. Who makes your living mocking people for entertainment? Jimmy's jaw tightened. I make my living bringing joy to people. You make your living complaining about the family that gave you everything. Everything. Prince Harry exploded, his voice echoing throughout the studio. They gave me nothing but trauma, obligation, and a lifetime of being treated like a performing monkey. And now you want to continue that tradition. What I want, Jimmy said, his patience finally exhausted, is for you to stop acting like the world owes you something. Because you had a difficult childhood. Lots of people have difficult childhoods. They don't all turn into entitled jerks. Prince Harry's laugh was completely devoid of humor. Entitled jerks? Is that your professional psychological assessment, Dr. Kimmel? It's my professional assessment. As someone who's watched you spend the last 15 minutes insulting everyone in this room, Jimmy fired back. You came on my show, you disrespected my staff, you insulted my audience, you made threats, and now you're acting like you're the victim. I am the victim, Prince Harry insisted, his voice rising again. I'm the victim of a system that chewed me up and spit me out, and now I'm the victim of a media culture that refuses to let me tell my truth. Jimmy threw his hands up in exasperation. Your truth? Your truth is that you can't handle being criticized without having a complete meltdown. Your truth is that you think being a prince gives you the right to treat people like servants. I have never treated anyone like a servant, Prince Harry protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Jimmy's eyebrows shot up. Because 20 minutes ago you were complaining about being kept waiting in your dressing room like some kind of peasant. You demanded special treatment from the moment you walked into this building. Prince Harry's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air, completely unable to form a coherent response to Jimmy's accusation. And now, Jimmy continued, pressing his advantage. You're standing in my studio, on my stage, threatening me and my audience because we didn't treat you like the special little prince you think you are." "I didn't threaten anyone," Prince Harry said weakly, but even he seemed to realize how hollow that sounded. "You talked about power and influence and consequences," Jimmy reminded him. "In what universe is that not a threat?" The production team was now frantically signaling from the wings. The show had already run over its allotted time, and the situation was spiraling completely out of control. But Jimmy Kimmel wasn't finished. "You know what's really sad about this whole thing?" Jimmy said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "You actually had something important to say? Mental health is a real issue. People are struggling, and they need help. But instead of using this platform to actually help people, you turned it into a showcase for your own personal dysfunction." Prince Harry's eyes filled with tears, but whether they were tears of rage or genuine emotion was impossible to tell. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. You don't understand what it's like to have the entire world watching your every move, judging your every decision." "You're right," Jimmy acknowledged. "I don't understand that kind of pressure. But I do understand that pressure doesn't give you the right to treat people badly. And I understand that if you can't handle that pressure, maybe you shouldn't be doing television interviews." "So what are you saying?" Prince Harry asked, his voice cracking. "That I should just disappear? That I should stop trying to make a difference?" "I'm saying you should get help," Jimmy replied bluntly. "Real help. Not the kind of help where people tell you what you want to hear because you're a prince. The kind of help where someone tells you the truth about your behavior." Prince Harry stared at him for a long moment, his breathing still labored and his hands still shaking. Then, without warning, he turned toward the audience and began addressing them directly. "You see this?" he said, gesturing wildly at Jimmy. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of disrespect and humiliation that I've been subjected to my entire life. And now it's happening again, in front of all of you." The audience sat in stunned silence. No one knew how to respond to this direct appeal from someone who was clearly having some kind of breakdown. Jimmy stepped forward. "Harry, you need to stop. You're making this worse for yourself." "Worse for myself?" Prince Harry laughed bitterly. "How could it possibly get worse? I've already lost everything. My family, my country, my identity. And now I'm losing my dignity. On American television." "You're not losing your dignity," Jimmy said, his voice softening slightly. "You're giving it away. Every word you speak, every threat you make, every insult you throw, you're choosing to give away your dignity." Prince Harry turned back to face Jimmy, and for the first time since the interview began, he looked genuinely vulnerable. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted quietly. "Then let me help you stop," Jimmy said gently. "Let's end this interview right now. Let's give you a chance to walk away with whatever dignity you have left." But Prince Harry shook his head violently. "No, I'm not walking away. I'm not running away anymore. I came here to have a conversation, and we're going to have it." "This isn't a conversation," Jimmy pointed out. "This is a breakdown, and it's being broadcast to millions of people." "Good," Prince Harry said defiantly. "Let them see what you've done to me. Let them see how you've treated me." Jimmy had finally reached his breaking point. He walked around his desk and stood directly in front of Prince Harry, looking him straight in the eye. "You know what, Harry? You want to know what I've done to you? I've treated you exactly like I treat every other guest on this show. With respect, with humor, and with the expectation that you'll behave like an adult. If you can't handle that, then you don't belong on television." Prince Harry's face contorted with rage one final time. "Fine, then I'll leave. But this isn't over, Kimmel. This is far from over." "Yes, it is," Jimmy said firmly. "Security, please escort His Royal Highness out of the building." As the security guards approached, Prince Harry looked around the studio one last time, his eyes wild and desperate. "You'll regret this," he called out as he was led toward the exit. "All of you will regret this." Jimmy watched him go, then turned back to his audience with a weary expression. "Well, folks, that's definitely a first for this show. I think we can all agree that mental health awareness is important, but maybe let's leave the advocacy to people who actually have their own mental health under control." The audience finally erupted in applause, but it was the kind of nervous, uncertain applause that follows a car accident or a natural disaster. Jimmy returned to his desk, straightened his tie, and looked directly into the camera. "When we come back, we'll try to salvage what's left of tonight's show. Stay with us." As the cameras cut away for commercial break, the studio remained eerily quiet. Everyone present knew they had just witnessed something unprecedented, something that would be talked about for years to come. The prince who claimed to champion mental health awareness had just demonstrated exactly why that awareness was so desperately needed. And that's the story of how Prince Harry got himself kicked off Jimmy Kimmel Live after the most explosive celebrity meltdown in late-night television history. What did you think of Prince Harry's behavior? Was Jimmy right to kick him off the show, or did he go too far? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.